On this episode of Locked On Lightning, we're taking a look at where the Lightning stand amongst their divisional foes. We're going to ask the question, who steps up for this team with the exit of Stamkos, as well as way too early predictions. All that coming up and more on Locked On Lightning.
You're Locked On Lightning, your daily podcast on the Tampa Bay Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome to another episode of Locked On Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Adam Dankert. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Locked On Lightning. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As we head into the summer, we don't have a lot of sports, but guess what? FanDuel is not stopping with all these great deals. All customers get a boost and a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/ to get started. So on tonight's episode, we're releasing this relatively late, but on this episode, we're talking about where the Lightning stand in the division. Where do they rank amongst their other teams that they have to contend with? A lot of moving parts in free agency. Still a lot of question marks to be asked with all these players kind of shifting teams and still trying to decide where they want to be this upcoming season, as well as with the exit of Steven Stamkos. Now, who steps up on this Lightning team? We already know what we're going to get out of Hedman. Already know what we're going to get out of Kucherov. We talk about some of the other players on this team, or the player who is going to fill that void for Stamkos. And then we talk about way too early predictions. But before we grab any of those topics, I humbly ask you to go ahead and subscribe to the podcast. Give us a follow wherever podcasts are distributed in audio form. We're also available on YouTube. Go ahead, subscribe to the channel there. Hit that notification button so as soon as the newest episode drops, you'll be notified and be able to listen, watch, or whatever you want to do with it. Go ahead and comment below this video as well for some of your predictions. We already got some of your predictions on Twitter. So if you don't have Twitter, go ahead, comment below. So a lot of moving parts. It was a very eventful couple of days, not only leading up to the start of NHL free agency, but as well as the first 2 days of NHL free agency. And it was, like I said, and I will say numerous times throughout this episode, very interesting. The Boston Bruins trade Linus Ullmark, which was a very... It will be interesting to see. I take a shot every time I say interesting. It was a very curious choice. I know why they did it. It's a money thing, as well as kind of they think, Jeremy Swayman is the guy there in Boston. As well as you look at with Florida, kind of an interesting situation as well there developing, as Florida is starting to sign some of the guys that they had. They signed Reinhart to long-term deal, which obviously he deserved it. He scored over 60 goals between the regular season and the playoffs. Big part of that cup-winning team. But they had a lot of money coming off the books this offseason. So, and as we know in Tampa Bay, you don't know. It's very hard to keep a team that has just won the cup together. Obviously, if a lot of players, the Lightning, different circumstances, but a lot of players coming off the books, and obviously everybody thinks they deserve a little bit more money, and rightfully so. Toronto is just a very, you know what? I feel bad for Maple Leaf fans, because they just, you go into every season with that team, that franchise, and I'm not crapping on them. I'm going to save that for the regular season, but it's just one of those things. It's every single year with this Maple Leaf team, where you look at the clear issues that surround them, or that they have on this team, and it's just they think that I don't know if it's an organizational philosophy I'm curious, I want to reach out to one of the guys on Locked On Leafs because I want to get their opinion on this. But I mean, what do you do? I mean, obviously goaltending's the issue here. If you really wanted to, you could make a deal for a guy like John Gibson, who's trying to get out of Anaheim and go play somewhere else. I don't know how interested he would be in playing in Toronto, but you got to do something up there in Toronto. And then, of course, the Mitch Marner situation hanging over their heads there. As for the teams that are usually in the mix with the Lightning for the top 3 spots in the division, plus, the wild card that we had this year, we take a look at the Red Wings, Sabres. We kind of talked about the Senators a little bit. I mentioned it on the previous episode about the Canadiens. They're going to be slightly better. I don't think they're going to be. I think maybe 2 years from now we'll start to kind of see where they'll be. Where obviously if you're a Canadiens fan, you're hoping for an upward trajectory. I think that they'll be in the spot where Buffalo is. But for as Detroit, who is, like I said, 2-3 years ago, they're a very well-run organization, as we all know, by former Lightning GMs, Steve Yzerman. He's doing a phenomenal job there. They're getting better and better each year, and that's obviously what you want to see when you're in a rebuild. And they're a team, they only finished 7 points behind the Lightning. I think that really what it came down to is that separated the Lightning and them is that they just ran out of steam at the end. They were playing very good hockey, and then once you got into the later stages of March, they just ran out of steam, and the Lightning kind of stayed the course and wrapped things up in the first couple of weeks of April to get that wild card spot. Buffalo, I just, they're just a team that they're kind of in no man's land right now. I had high hopes for them heading into last season. I still do. I think that they're going to be a good team. I mean, they always play the Lightning well. We all know that. As for Detroit, I think Detroit's going to get a little bit closer to the Lightning. I think that it's going to be a matter of 3 points, maybe even less, depending on how the Lightning do. I think that really, when you look at this division as a whole, I mean, and real side note, because I didn't talk about them that much, the Senators, I just think they're going to stay stagnant. I just think that maybe it's kind of dependent on what you get from Allmark. New atmosphere, it not always a good thing for a player. So we'll just kind of have to wait and see with that. And maybe one more piece scoring-wise or really defensive-wise. But as for the division as a whole, I think we'll see obviously competitiveness out of Florida, out of Toronto. Boston, I think, takes maybe a little bit of a step back. I said that last year and the year before, and look what happened with them. They're just a team that just finds a way to win. They're just a very, overall very good franchise. Very well coached, very good group of players. If the Lightning if they re-signed Stamkos, I probably would have said that maybe the Lightning and the Maple Leafs have a chance of grabbing those those 2 and 3 spots in the division. But with Boston, you never know. You never know. And as for where the Lightning kind of stand in all of this, I think really it's going to be more of the same story this upcoming season in the division as what we saw last season. Really the key here is, can they get off to a good start? Can they get off to a fast start? Can I get those points as early as possible in the season to kind of supplement or kind of support the times where they're going to have tough schedules? You look at the Lightning schedule now, if you're a believer or somewhat of a firm believer in strength of schedule in the NHL, I can't really say whether or not that's a real thing. I mean, we could really sit here on one episode later in the summer and get down to it once kind of the dust has settled and then everybody is where they're going to be. But the Lightning, there's no such thing as an easy spot in a schedule in the NHL. I know that sounds super cliche and lame, but it's really true. And really, they're going to go through their rough spots. Every team does. And I think that really the important thing for this Lightning team, especially in a division that is getting more competitive and more competitive every single year, it's really, really important for this Lightning team to get as many points in the first month and a half as possible. I'm not saying it's going to be the difference between a playoff spot and not. It's not going to be the difference between a wild card spot and the divisional playoff spot. But I'm not going to say it's not, because it's just one of those things where, especially if the Lightning are able to kind of turn things around, or especially if they get off to a slow start. We saw it earlier in the season, last season, losing certain games to certain teams. Just really disappointing performances to start the season. Obviously, Kucherov, and was really the glue that held it all together. Vasilevsky was out, so there's that variable there as well as you look at the beginning of this upcoming season and you think about the keys about what needs to happen. Vasilevsky needs to get off to a good start, and really that's something that it's more important now than ever, given where the Lightning do rank in this division. Because, like I said, looking at this division, Florida is going to be good. Toronto is going to put up points. I mean, Toronto and Florida are going to be 100-point teams once again. That's just good coaching on one team and just very good players, one of which top 5 in the league. So there's that as well. But the Lightning need to pick up as many points as they can, just to maybe try and fight out or squeak out that third spot in the division, so you don't have to worry about the wild card fight at the end of the year like we kind of were sweating about at the end of this season with Detroit, because Detroit's going to be in it. I'd be shocked if they weren't. So that means obviously Boston's going to have to just, keep up with the Lightning. And because, we're going to get good teams coming out of the East, the Metropolitan. So, it's really going to be a dumpster fire of a conference, a very big dogfight of a division, and the Lightning are going to be right in the middle of it. As for how much of a fight they're going to put up, we'll have to wait and see until the rosters are officially set, and then we could finally, have a concrete idea of what we'll be looking at on opening night against the Carolina Hurricanes. So let me know in the comments below what your feelings about that. I know it's only July, but as we all know, the NHL offseason moves by very quickly at certain points. You're sitting there in the middle of August and you're saying, oh my God, I wish the season was tomorrow. I can't wait. And then boom, it's October. So let me know in the comments below how you're feeling about all of that. And coming up in just a little bit, with Steven Stamkos out of the picture now in Nashville, the Lightning lose, obviously, a reliable scorer, and a leader. So naturally, we ask ourselves, as well as you, the listener, who's going to step up? Who's the next man up? Who's going to be, I wouldn't say the next Steven Stamkos, but the next man in line to take that role of leader and possibly scorer? We talk about that coming up in just a little bit. But first, we're going to talk about one of today's sponsors, and that is our friends over at eBay Motors. Now, passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered with over 122 million parts. For your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. So as always, I want to thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. If you haven't already done so, please go ahead and subscribe to the podcast. Give us a follow wherever podcast are should be in audio form. We're also available on YouTube, so go ahead and subscribe to our channel there. Hit that notification button if you're listening to us on an app-based platform, so as soon as the newest episode drops, you'll be notified, and you could go ahead and follow us on our social media pages, LO_Lightning on Twitter, as well as LockedOn_Lightning on Instagram. You can give me a follow on Twitter at DankyDank, DENKYD8NK. If you want to follow more of my work, you could hop on over to boltsbythebay.com. So obviously the question now that remains for the Lightning, other than the numerous, I guess, roster spots that are sort of lingering. I mean, I you look on the Hockey Reference and you look at the roster, it's just, like I said a couple episodes ago, fourth line looks a little rough. Lightning have some money to play with, so it will be, I'm curious to see what is done from now until training camp, or if the Lightning just say, we're going to sit on this money, we're going to bring up some guys from Syracuse and see what we could do. But the other question that is going along with that, obviously, is now with the absence or departure, if you will, of Steven Stamkos, what happens now? Who is here to fill the void of reliable scorer / leader, if you want to throw that hat on there as well? And when I look at this team, and this is, I could already tell, I kind of mentioned it a couple of episodes ago, if not a week ago. When I think about that player, and I think about, we think about this Lightning team, and we think about the wheels on the wagon. We think about Cooch, we think about Point, we think about Vasilevsky and Hedman. I think that's reasonable assumption that those four guys are really what gets this team going in the right direction. Now, obviously, you need an extra guy, as the Lightning have had the luxury of having over the last 16 years in Steven Stamkos, being able to be that guy. Now, obviously, Cooch is that guy. I don't think he's the leader. I think Hedman's that guy, but you also need an extra player among some of the other players on this team to be that guy. And I'll come out and say it real quick. Jake Guentzel isn't that guy. I think that he adds a boatload of experience. He brings the leadership factor. But don't expect him to be the yin to Kucherov's yang. That's just not what's going to happen, and that's really not what the expectation should be. And I don't think Lightning fans, as I'm starting to kind of see in the deep spaces of Twitter and social media in general for the Lightning fan spaces, don't hang whatever performance that you think you may or may not be getting from Stamkos if he were still around, and throw that all on Guentzel. He's his own player. He's going to put up stats. He's going to put up goals. He's going to put up points. Like I said, he's going to be a 30-goal scorer again, maybe even a little higher, 35, even 40 if we're lucky. Possibly a 90-point guy, and that's it. He's not scoring 40 goals. He's not a pure scorer. He's a two-way forward who is going to come in and help the Lightning win games. That's it. But he's not a Steven Stamkos. He's not going to be one of the big guys on the team, regardless of how you feel about his contract. But when I look at this Lightning team right now, and my expectations for who I would expect to jump into some sort of scoring role as well as leadership role, common sense to me at least tells me that guy is Anthony Cirelli. And it makes perfect sense, especially with how this team is constructed right now. and also for my own selfish pleasure of seeing him play on the first line with Point and Kucherov. I think Cirelli, enough time has passed in his career to where that is not something that is way out of the box to ask of him. As well as if you've been a listener of this podcast for quite some time, you know I'm a firm believer, A, in guys getting their money, getting that bag, but B, you gotta show me what you got for it. You know, you gotta put some performance behind that paycheck, especially when money is tight like it is in Tampa Bay. And yeah, they have a little bit more breathing room than what we are normally sometimes accustomed to, but still, every dollar still counts. And I think Anthony Cirelli is ready for that role. I think that as long as he stays healthy, I think we will see some sort of consistent performance out of him, in which we will see a guy who can play well defensively down the middle and will be able to score 30 goals and put up maybe 85 assists if he's playing on that first line. But even if he's not, which I would almost really right now be shocked, but at the same time not, because I would assume that if we're going into the season with what we have right now, which chances are most likely, yeah, that we are going to see him play on the second line. And I still think, regardless of who he's playing with, whether it's Brandon Hagel, whether it's Cam Atkinson on his other wing, or Nick Paul, I think he's going to almost be forced to have to put up that numbers, to put up that workload. And because of that, you almost have to expect it too, because I look at it this way. This is the year, not only that he is ready, I firmly believe that he is, to become that player, but he has to become that player. If the Lightning want to be successful, if the Lightning want to compete in this division, like I said, that is super competitive and continues to get better on a year-by-year basis, where I think this year we might start to see a little bit of a changing of the guard. That depends on Buffalo and Ottawa. But what I'm really trying to say here is that if the Lightning want to be successful, if Anthony Cirelli wants to be successful, if Anthony Cirelli wants to prove his merit, if he wants to have his Lightning career moment to where all of us as fans say and can look back on and say, this is when Anthony Cirelli turned it on, it has to be this year. It has to be a 30-goal season, near, like I said, 90 points, maybe 85. I'll settle for, but would really prefer 90. And he also has to have a Selke finalist-like season. Because as what we've seen with even this past playoffs, in order to be successful and to get into the playoffs and be successful in the playoffs, you got to have a good center. And the Lightning kind of don't have that right now with Steven Stamkos being gone. I know he played a majority of his time on the wing, but yes, he was also a center at times. So let me know in the comments below, who was your pick? I remember from when I talked about it on Twitter a couple of days ago, some of you said Nick Paul. Some of you, I forgot what some of you said. Some of you said, I think one person said Esamont, Hagel. Those are all good choices. I think one of you said Paul. But yeah, I think out of all of those, I mean, really, there's not many that are a bad choice. I think if you want to interchange it with Nick Paul, that's fine. That's great. I think Nick Paul's a phenomenal player. I think that if Cirelli goes up to the first, then Paul is a shoe-in for the second. You almost have to play him at that point in the second line. Not saying that he's not good enough, but that's just the way the pecking order goes, really. But yeah, I'm expecting a lot out of Anthony Cirelli. And in that same breath, coming up in our next segment, we're talking about way too early expectations, or predictions, actually, what we expect to see out of this team, even though it is only July 10th. So stick around for that. But first, we're going to talk about our last sponsor on today's show, and that is our friends over at FanDuel.com. Now, the summer is going to be a little bit quiet, obviously. The summer always is. You know, gone are the days where we get hockey in July. Just a couple of days ago, the Lightning completed their repeat. That was the anniversary. So that's always cool to look back on. Summer hockey. But we don't have that anymore. And now we're just baseball. So if you're a Rays fan, sorry about your season. I'm a Met fan, so I can't really say anything. I got Grimace, so I guess that's good. But at least we could still bet on sports. We got the Olympics coming up. Wimbledon's going on right now for my tennis fans. And we also got the Scottish Open coming this weekend for my golf nuts. And you could bet on it all, even daily, with all the deals that are going on at FanDuel.com. Because this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head on over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So one last time, I want to thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. If you haven't already done so, please go ahead and subscribe to the podcast. Give us a follow wherever podcasts are distributed in audio form. We're also available on YouTube, so go ahead and check us out there. Drop a comment below your way too early predictions, as well as obviously who you think is going to step up for this Lightning team, and how do you view this Lightning team within the scope of the division? Because really, at the end of the day, that's the most important thing. So looking at the season ahead, it does tie in with our division talk, because obviously the yearly goal, I think, for the Lightning, as well as the fan base, we expect this team to be in the top 3 conversation at least. A, because just that's how we view this team. And B, because just it's a lot. I feel like, I mean, this is an obvious point to make, but it's an easier race to win, because then you're just worrying about one team in the grand scheme of things. This year, might be worrying about Detroit as well. Who knows? Let's see what they do. But you don't have to. It's not like the wild card where you got to worry about 3-4 teams behind you breathing down your neck. So that really starts my first prediction. As of now, like I said before, this might change because of moves that not only the Lightning make, but possibly what other teams within the division make. I'm expecting the Lightning to finish 4th in the division like they did last year. I think really the wild card race is going to be really tight. I think it kind of depends on what goes on with Carolina. It kind of also depends on Washington. Washington's going to be good. With all the moves they're making, they're going to be a good team this year. They're really trying to go for it. I wouldn't be surprised if they make a run for that 3rd spot in the Metropolitan, which obviously leaves the Islanders kind of odd man looking in. But the Islanders are going to be good this year. Like I said, it kind of depends on what the Hurricanes do. But I expect the Lightning to contend for one of those wild card spots coming out of the East. Preferably, I think they'll be in the third spot in the Atlantic. But yeah, I think that the Lightning will be kind of somewhat in the same situation that they were last year that they are this year. My other prediction is Andrei Vasilevsky. I think he's going to have a phenomenal first 2 months of the season. I think that we saw a glimmer of his old self in that very short playoff series against the Panthers. Not his fault, of course, that the Lightning lost that series. There was just a lot of question marks, a lot of holes in front of him, not only during that series, but all season long. And all things considered, he had a pretty good season. But I think that coming into this season, kind of getting your mojo back, getting back in the groove, you get McDonough back in the cards, which, some people don't like that deal. I get it. The contract is really a killer for the Lightning. It kind of really cuffs them in terms of trying to get better in other areas of the team. But I think in the long run, even if he doesn't play defensively sound hockey, I think just having that old voice back in the locker room, I think it really helps you a lot. I know that's not something that a lot of Lightning fans want to hear, but you also saw a little bit of a resurgence from him in Nashville. That could just be from playing in Nashville, different scheme, all that. I know that Nashville loves getting their defensemen involved a lot. Case in point, Roman Josi. But I think that maybe it's wishful thinking. We see that more this year. But with Vasilevsky, I think that we finally start to see some of those numbers from the years he was just head and shoulders above all the other goaltenders in the league. I expect we see something around that, if not better. I think that he comes back with full force, and right away it becomes one of the top 3 favorites for the Vezina this year. My last prediction for this season, this might be a little bit out of the box. And if I nail this, I'm not going to stop talking about this forever. But my last prediction to wrap up the show here is Brandon Hagel becomes a 40-goal scorer for the first time in his career. I just really liked his game the last couple of years. Brandon Hagel getting traded to the Lightning from Chicago for 2 top-level prospects who, quite frankly, haven't done much out there in Chicago. Might be one of the best trades the Lightning have ever made in their history. So I say he scores 40 goals. I say he has 85 points, 10 points more than what he had last year. Man, something like that. I think that it also depends, like we always talk about. It really, in the end, depends on what Cooper does with the combinations, what he does with the lines. But I think that this is the year where the team as a whole, they can't sit back anymore. It also might be a combination to new leader on the team and more of an urgency. I'm not saying that Stamkos was lax than previous years, but I think that we don't get especially now, we don't get a mentality of let's just get into the playoffs. No, it's let's do our best to win the whole damn thing. And when I say that, I mean the division. And then we go from there. So let me know what your predictions are. They don't necessarily have to align with mine. If you want to say Victor Hedman will score 25 points this year, 25 goals this year, go ahead. If you want to say Jonas Johansson's starts this year will be, the over-under is 20. No, let's say 30. 30, go ahead and do that and say that it's the over. Whatever you want to do. Let me know in the comments below on our YouTube page. And I have a phenomenal, fantastic announcement. Finally, after much wait, we will be starting our 2004 Stanley Cup run segment tomorrow. So check that out on tomorrow's episode. So in the meantime, that's been it for this episode of Locked On Lightning, part of Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam Tanker. I'll talk to you in the next one.